Okay, today we'll talk about two architects. We'll begin with Étienne-Louis Boullée, the great visionary architect of the 18th century, born in 1728 and died in 1799. An emotionally committed neoclassicist. Somebody used these words. They are not mine, but I am tempted to agree that there is something correct here, but this is more than just this. So Étienne-Louis Boullée, born on the 12th of February, so this month we'll talk twice about him, but died on the 4th of February 1799, was a visionary French neoclassical architect whose work greatly influenced contemporary architects. And contemporary architects, that refers to our time. Boullée's fondness for grandiose designs has caused him to be characterized as both a megalomaniac and a visionary. His focus on polarity, offsetting opposite design elements, and the use of light and shadow was highly innovative and continues to influence architects to this day. He was so-called rediscovered in the 20th century and has influenced recent architects. Well, when this text was written, now it's not so recent. Recent architects such as Aldo Rossi. Aldo Rossi died in a car accident. Salon for the Hôtel de Tourol. Hotel Alexandre, also known as Hotel Sou, is a hotel particulier in the 8th arrondissement of Paris, France, designed by Étienne-Louis Boullée. The building was constructed from 1763 to 1766 and is the best surviving structure designed by Boullée. Not too many things built by him survived, and maybe he didn't even build so much. He is famous for his drawings, for his projects. This is an 18th century, neoclassical hotel. Now, if it is emotionally charged or not, we can talk about it. It still stands, and you will say it's nothing very special about it. Maybe a certain, softness of design, but otherwise, yeah, neoclassicism, 18th century, building by Étienne-Louis Boullée. Rendering from I don't know when, maybe 19th century, maybe 18th. Yeah, I prefer his drawings. And you see, it's possible just with drawings, with projects, to make it into the glorious history of architecture. 1909 photograph of the building by this famous French photographer, Eugène Ager. Here it is, the building by Étienne-Louis Boullée. When was it? 1909. That's how it looked like. Now, cenotaph, this is a very famous work by him, perhaps the most famous, the cenotaph for Sir Isaac Newton, a project from 1784, and I am sure you know it. But let's read a little bit about it. Boulée promoted the idea of making architecture expressive for its purpose, a doctrine that his detractors termed architecture parlante, talking architecture, which was an essential element in Beaux-Arts architectural training in the later 19th century. So talkative architecture, architecture parlante, talking architecture. His style was most notably exemplified in his proposal for a cenotaph, a funerary monument celebrating a figure interred elsewhere, for the English scientist Isaac Newton, who 50 years after his death became a symbol of Enlightenment ideas. The building itself was a 150 meters tall sphere, taller than the Great Pyramids of Giza, encompassed by two large barriers circled by hundreds of cypress trees. The massive and spheric shape of the building was inspired by Boulée's own study called Theory of Bodies, where he claims that the most beautiful and perfect natural body is the sphere, which is the most proeminent element of the Newton memorial. Though the structure was never built, Boullee had many ink and wash drawings engraved and circulated widely in the professional circles in 1784. The small sarcophagus for Newton is placed at the lower pole of the sphere. The design of the memorial is intended to create the effect of day and night. The night effect occurs when the sarcophagus is illuminated by the sunlight coming through the holes in the vaulting, giving the illusion of stars in the night sky. So it's interesting, you know, the night effect actually happens during the day. The day effect is in an armillary sphere hanging in the center that gives off a mysterious glow. Thus, the use of light in the building's design causes the building's interior to change its appearance. And here it is. You certainly know it. It's a very famous rendering. It's certainly not the most modest building envisioned by human beings, but this was the visionary architect Boulée who wanted to celebrate a great human mind, Isaac Newton's, in this way. A commemorative architecture. That's what it is. So during the day, it would look like this, and during the night, it would look like this. Can you believe it? Rather interesting. The whole idea and the renderings are excellent. But this kind of architecture can only be produced by an architect who understands that he is not just you know, the slave of a possible client, but a visionary. You know, someone who wants to celebrate life, death, eternity, you name it, concerned with the ideas that transcend, you know, the things that we think life is reduced to or reducible to. The cenotaph for Isaac Newton. Now, this is how we envisioned an interior view of the building when the day was growing towards the night. And the cypress trees are trees used to be used for, you know, commemorative purposes relating to death. That's why he employed these trees around the building and also on these terraces around the building. Again, not the most modest architectural structure ever conceived by a human being. You see the silhouettes of the humans. I mean, this was supposed to be huge. The cenotaph for Isaac Newton, Étienne-Louis Boullée, visionary architect of the 18th century in France. And he is usually associated with Claude Nicolas Ledoux and Boullée, both visionary architects. Ledoux built more than Boullée, but it's possible that his fame resides, like in the case of Boulée, mainly on the basis of his drawings. And when Louis Kahn was asked to write a foreword to an album, a book on Ledoux and Boulée, he wrote this beautiful short poem, which is probably the only poem that I know by heart. And I will, if you allow me, I will recite it for you. It's very short and it's not really a poem, but it has the appearance of a poem. The spirit in will to express can make the great sun seem small. The sun is thus the universe. Did we need Bach? Bach is thus music is. Did we need le doux? Did we need Boulée? Le doux is, Boulée is, thus architecture is. This is how Louis Kahn expressed his, I would say, admiration for le doux and Boulée. But today we talk only about Boulée. Étienne-Louis Boullée. Now I show something else because I like to relate what we call the past to the present. And I discovered this cultural center in Tijuana in Mexico, which was clearly inspired by the work by Boulée. And it's actually incredible that, you know, Boulée arrived at inspiring a work in Tijuana, which is, you know, the very frontier between the United States and Mexico. And it's a place of destitution, you know, with alcoholics and prostitutes and, you know, all the misery of human life. But this cultural center in Tijuana seems to contradict all of that. Here it is, if you can believe it or not. It was not built in the United States, it was built in Mexico, in Tijuana. So the idealism of Boulée inspired these architects to build this cultural center in Tijuana. There it is. During the construction. Let me look again at it because it's hard to believe that they did this in Tijuana. It's not a cenotaph for you know, Newton. It's just the form that inspired these architects, and they built it in this you know, place which had a very different kind of reputation, certainly not related to, you know, high culture. I'm going to show later a library built by MVRDV in China, also inspired by Boulée. So again, in my opinion, a relevant, important so-called past doesn't pass. That's why I show, you know, the consequences of these works in the present. Here we have McDonald's, the great cultural, of course I'm sarcastic, cultural export of the United States. And here we have the French cultural export of Boulée to the same place, Tijuana, the frontier between Mexico and the United States. So maybe there is no need to repeat. This is not done by Boulée, but it was inspired by Boulée for a different purpose. Now, the second project by Boulée for the Library of the King from 1785. A huge metaphor for the vastness of culture, or, you know, the vastness of knowledge transmitted through books. Bibliothèque Nationale, Étienne-Louis Boullée, unbuilt, designed in 1785, Paris, France. Again, not the most modest library in the world, that's for sure. But here he tried to evoke the power, the relevance of what knowledge should have. If it was built, I imagine it would have been indeed very impressive. I mean, it is impressive in renderings as well. And there is a complex symbolism here. I think I have some slides, some pictures with. I didn't study them, but it was a complex project. I discovered on a website all kinds of references here. We see Atlas, and I'm not sure. I guess this is the entrance, but why is this circle here? I guess, you know, it could be imagined that the entrance into the actual library might have something to do with or maybe there is outside statue, or he proposed a statue of Atlas outside of the library. I don't know. Let's see here. Boulée's unbuilt place de la Bibliothèque du Roi à la rue Colbert. So I guess he proposed it for a specific place in Paris. It was not built. 120, well, centimeters, it cannot be. This is the drawing, of course, not the actual. Now, why is the School of Athens by Raphael here shown? I guess in order to show what animated Boulée, you know, the ideal of the School of Athens, you know, actualized in Paris in the 18th century. He imagined, you know, the quest for knowledge to be kind of similar in the painting by Raphael and in the building proposed by Boulée. A dreamer, of course. But we need dreamers, I think. We need dreamers as well. And the best of them are those who are dreamers, but also capable of assuming reality in its sometimes less dreamy ways. Now, I don't know. This is, I mean, yeah, it's a section through the building. It looks like almost like a little house, you know, with a sloping roof, but it's actually huge. You saw a perspectival drawing of the main room. Now, by the way of this, I thought of, because it was inspired by Boulée, this Tianjin Binhai library in China by NVRDV. You probably know it. It was publicized, you know, copiously. And, you know, like the work in Tijuana in Mexico, this one also shows that the incredible impact that Étienne-Louis Boullée had on architecture, mainly through drawings, not through built works. But even MVRDV found, you know, an explicit influence coming from Boulée when they built this library. And the idea to, I mean, you know, there are many non-functional things here, like, you know, here there are books everywhere, you know, which you cannot access. Most of the books in this library you cannot access. You can only access, you know, to this level, and that's it, nothing above. So it's the return of the book to the world, which I find very, you know, interesting, because as Victor Hugo said, after Gutenberg, the book killed the cathedral, because the knowledge that was present in the stained glass windows and the walls of the cathedral, the biblical knowledge, slowly, or maybe not so slowly found place in the pages of printed books. So in this way, the book killed the cathedral. That's what Victor Hugo said. And now the internet, the web, they kill the book, or the book wants to return to the world. In a way, the book, the knowledge of the book, the pages of the book want to return to constitute walls. That is, you know, metaphorically, symbolically, the cathedral. It's an interesting process. So, you know, I keep telling this the students, those few students who want to, you know, reflect on this. Even if you only leave behind yourself drawings, if they have something important to say, you could say that you participated to the discourse of architecture and about architecture significantly, and you are part of what architecture is, just as Boulée was through his projects. Again, how do you access these books? They are not meant to be accessed. They just you know, populate the walls and the ceiling with knowledge. If by books we mean knowledge, as we should. So obviously, this is not a functionalist building at all. The problem with functionalism is that it forgot completely other meanings of architecture and other ways of buildings, other ways of doing architecture, and other ways in which buildings could manifest themselves on a symbolical level, a metaphorical level, inspirational level, and so on. To reduce architecture to functionalism is to kill it, because there are other functions of human life which should be addressed. So this is in China by MVRDV, clearly influenced by Boulée. Now, other projects and drawings by Boulée. We are approaching the end of this short presentation. All of them quite immodest, and all of them so-called flirting with death. I mean, really, these are all, you know, funerary monuments. They are all concerned with the afterlife and with commemoration in a clearly, you know, as Guillaume Apollinaire would say, you know, useless way, because Apollinaire, the French poet who was a friend of the best painters of modernity in France, he said best architecture is almost always useless. He said a pyramid, in order to build a tomb or a grave, to make a grave or a tomb, you don't need to make all that huge pyramid. The same here, you know. So most of this is actually useless if by usage we understand the, you know, economy of means, serving you know, a clearly defined purpose. Here we have, it's the metaphorical, the symbolic meaning that gives shape to the building as Boulée envisioned it. Or here, look, you know, in essence, is death is informing Étienne-Louis Boullée more than life, because it's about the eternal. But as Charles Baudelaire said, the formidable poet of modernity in the 19th century, he said, art has two halves. One half speaks about the eternal, the immutable, the permanent, and the other half speaks about the transitory, the ephemeral, the circumstantial. And art indeed needs both halves. Now, here we see more an attempt to connect with the eternal and the immutable. I mean, he had indeed grandiose visions, very much so. Not even a king could have built something like this, or something like this, or something like this. Not even a pharaoh, forget about the king, maybe. Étienne-Louis Boullée, theoretician of revolutionary architecture, together with Claude Nicolas Ledoux. His library, the second project. Now look here, and this is the plan. I forgot for what function. Is incredible. I mean, it's huge. I regret I don't have here. I forgot what it was meant for. He did all kinds of such drawings for, you know, utopian purposes or commemorating death. Étienne-Louis Boullée. (1728, 1799). So he died at 71 years old. He was when he died. The human beings, the human silhouettes are minuscule, you know, like insects. You know, look here, you know, these are supposed to be human beings. You know. Project for an opera house, 1781, architecture drawing, 1781, an opera house. This is an opera house for the gods, not for human beings. Maybe for the parents of the gods, for the gods of the gods, or the gods of the gods of the gods. I mean, for the ultimate realities. It's huge. But he was indeed what we might call a visionary architect. Although we use the words visionary usually when we don't comprehend the work of someone, and then we call that someone visionary. It's not necessarily a compliment. It's more like an expression of a misunderstanding or lack of an understanding. A plan for a museum, Étienne-Louis Boullée. The Museum of Museums, or the Museum of Museums of Museums. And what is this? God, my God, a vertical building all of a sudden. This is how he occupied his days, with envisioning such immodest structures. Okay, now we go to the second presentation, just a small presentation. I mean, not a lengthy presentation about a Dutch architect. These the Dutch never cease to amaze us with how many interesting architects and artists they have and had. Incredible. It's just incredible. He's less known, but I felt it might not hurt anyone and anything if we talk a little bit about him. Frank van Klingeren. So he was, unlike Herman Hahn, a real outsider in the Dutch architecture scene of the 1960s and 70s. Trained as a construction engineer, he was a self-taught architect that kept away from architecture gatherings or cliques. He was more at home among people from avant-garde theater of the period than among forum architects like Aldo van Eyck, Bakema, and Herzberger, although he shared a lot of his ideas with the latter. They even received the Fritz Schumacher Prize in 1974 together. Herzberger for his central Becher office in Apeldoorn, and van Klingeren for, you read it, in Eindhoven. Both buildings celebrating multifunctionality and an openness towards change. I like this. openness towards change, as the motto of the art, architecture, and design biennial in Vienna was, change was our only chance. Although Frank van Klingeren was quite productive as an architect from the late 50s to the mid 70s, his main claim to fame was established with the design of 3 consecutive multicultural community buildings, or Agora, as he called them. And you read the names there, so 3 of them. But his media presence was broader than that. Especially after finishing the Merpal, he evolved towards a counterculture societal critic and television personality, while keeping his distance from direct involvement in flower power, hippie or provo movements. He was in that sense a provocateur in a business suit. Now, this is that building that we just read about, multifunctional building, with an open plan, where all kinds of activities took place in a very democratic and non-hierarchical way. And here it is. And I like very much the spirit of what I see here. Some people doing theater somewhere, some people here playing volleyball, other people here sitting on chairs and maybe eating and talking or whatever. All kinds of activities taking place in a unique space. There is some anarchy here, but I like the openness of the idea and the openness of the possibilities that such a hybrid activity would allow. You have a market, you have people eating, you have under different times during the day, different activities take place under the roof of this, architectural umbrella, if we are to call it so. But I think it expresses well the spirit of the Dutch society, open to experiments, this openness, maybe the same openness that Walter Gropius referred to when he said, the mind is at its best when it is like an umbrella, which works best when it is open. And indeed, if it rains, the relevance of an umbrella is when it is open. And maybe, an open mind should be open all the time, as if it is raining all the time. Now, another Agora in a model, while construction work for the first one that we saw was still going on, Van Klingeren was commissioned to design a similar multifunctional building for Lelystad, the second new town to be built in Flevoland and planned to become the largest city and capital of the new Polder province. The first design elaborated further on the open concept and mix of functions of the first one we saw. In this case, however, the scale was larger, and Van Klingeren managed to lure in the churches, 3 different denominations into the collective. I love this. He managed to, to invite 3 churches of different denominations into this new enterprise he initiated. Although each church would have its own space, it was to be open like the open air theater, and as Van Klingeren argued, since these spaces would only be used on Sundays, they could double as extra theater and meeting spaces for the rest of the week. Nice. Meanwhile, it was decided that not Lelystad, but a newer town, Almere, to be built closer to Amsterdam, would be more important and bigger, and construction of Lelystad was delayed. This meant that the scale and budget of Van Klingeren's Lelystad Agora diminished too. Instead, Van Klingeren proposed the opposite, to enlarge the program with shops and housing facilities, hotel, boarding house, but to do this within the limited budget. To do more with less was one of his favorite slogans. I am totally on his side. to do more with less and not to do less with more. He proposed a U-shaped steel post and beam structure of 3 stories to be left open and to be so-called colonized over time by the people and by entrepreneurs. The ground floor would still be the Marpal, the first one we saw, but a swimming pool was added to the programmatic mix. This open ground floor would be connected to the adjoining park, so much so that Van Klingeren started to title the different zones in the layout as if they were landscapes: theater landscape, youth cave, swimming and undressing landscape, etc. All in an open, wall-less setting. While the Marpol could be called urbanism, realized with architectural means, this last design for Lelystad would have been a landscape design instead, growing over time. The proposal proved to be too radical for Lelystad, and the toned down conventional Agora was built in the city center by one of Van Klingeren former employees. And this is in Eindhoven from 1970. Estate centers are now really beginning to appear with a single flexible structure. They combine all the facilities required by a community, from schools to health centers, libraries, gymnasiums, restaurants, supermarkets, and banks, all within pedestrian distance from homes. This example, which is new even for Holland, meaning the Netherlands, belongs to Herzenbruggen estate, recently built to the east of Eindhoven. It has 1,700 apartments for some 7,000 inhabitants, almost of whom are young couples. This estate center, and we are going to see images, it's called like this, occupies a slightly higher and undulating site on the edge of the estate, surrounded by a green belt. It has a ground floor on 3 gently staggered levels and basement floor. The structure is formed by 37 large square self-bearing canopies in steel and glass, with shafts spaced at intervals of 14 meters, 14.40 meters. In the daytime, the interior is lit by the sun through the glass roofing, and in the evening by a system fitted into the framework of the canopies themselves, together with a heating system. Ventilation is effected by openings in the pitched roofing, which allow fresh air to enter, and by means of aspirators housed in the top of canopies. Estate dwellers will find everything they need here without having to waste time going for miles in different directions every day. Things like shopping, taking the children to school, or going to the doctor can all be done under the same roof. Parents going shopping can see their children attending lessons, and this makes school more natural and spontaneous, just as the covered piazza in the middle of the center, used for games, concerts, and meetings, is also natural. Designed at the same time as the estate with a consultancy of sociologists, doctors, and teachers, this center was ready for its users, for the estate inhabitants when they moved in. However, they have taken to it with a natural and enterprising spirit. The center really works. The architecture, which is simply a system of roofing, sorry, the 2 O's are necessary, is at the same time an identifying sign and landmark. And here it is, what he built, and again, it works. It works, this openness of the spirit and the openness of society. You know, he essentially did just this, you know, a modular roofing system, which he assembled 37 times. I don't know why 37 and not 36. Anyway, 37 apparently, and underneath, all kinds of activities happen. Someone sells clothes there, maybe second-hand clothes. Children study, take classes not far away. Parents go shopping for food or whatever, all underneath this this canopy. I truly admire this spirit of the Netherlands. You know, it's very, very open and, you know, experimental. There is a freshness here, which I think should be acknowledged and admired. And architecturally also, I think is not just you know acceptable. It has elegance and it works structurally, and you know thus is an expression of a societal reality, an adequate expression. I like it. Frank van Klingeren, an engineer and self-taught architect. This is interesting about the Dutch. They are known as being very pragmatic, but exactly when they are very pragmatic, they also become poetical. So this interesting, you know, transformation or metamorphosis between pragmatism and poesis is, I would say, an invitation towards optimism. These very pragmatic people actually do experiments which are almost poetical in spirit. And look, while the parents do shopping, the children, you know, take courses in something. You know, they learn something. So the school is part of is underneath the same canopy. In this section appears to be very rigid, but you know the reality of the space and of the activities that happen there is different. So you know a drawing bidimensional as it is could be misleading. You see all kinds of activities take place underneath this modular structure. To an extent, it even looks somehow futuristic, you know, but it was that spirit of the late 60s, the beginning of the 70s, you know, where, I don't know, where people still believe they can change the world. Uh, it's easy to understand that children who are, you know, taught in such an environment, they become themselves very open, because the architecture, that this is not the enclosed classroom, you know, with equidistant tables and stiff atmosphere, is an open space, and they become open-minded because they grew up in an open space. So as we see from the plan, you know, that the longitudinal section is actually not telling the story adequately, because in plan there is some movement, there is some dynamic you know atmosphere here, which that section didn't you know anticipate. Now I don't know what is this during the construction or but even like this, I think the architecture is freshly asserting itself as an open space of possibilities. Frank van Klingeren. I guess this is how it looks like now. So I guess, you know, Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris was not so different in spirit from what we look at here, except that this is not in the center of Paris and it's not a vertical building, it's a horizontal building. But the spirit or the ideology of the building, if we can call it so, is not very different from what Renzo Piano and Sir Richard Rogers proposed and built. Although there was another architect who, unfortunately, I forgot his name, an Italian architect who collaborated with them, and then, of course, the great engineer Peter Rice, who died young, unfortunately. That's it. So thank you for being here today.